This is a visual essay about the movie Citizen Kane, 1941, directed by Orson Welles. The essay will analyze three film theory aspects: romance, power, and feminism. The film is based on Charles Foster Kane's life, who owns newspaper companies. The film starts with a group of journalists who are trying to find the meaning of Kane's last word, Rosebud. This group interview Kane's best colleagues. Thus, these interviews take us through Kane's life. The first theory aspect is romance. This theory aspect plays an important role in the film, as it is one of the reasons that Charles lives and dies as well. Through the movie, we see Charles in relationship with two women, Emily and Susan. However, we only see how Charles falls in love with Susan. In this scene, we see Charles and Susan meeting by the first time. Both are clearly interested in each other. The dialogue, sound, and cinematography enhance this sense of romanticism and show clearly their emotions, showing how attracted they are by each other. However, by the end of the movie, Susan abandons Charles, becoming one of the reasons of his death. This act of a man being abandoned by a woman is a fact of how dependent men are from women, and is reflected on men's emotions. Therefore, is related with romanticism. This is another example used by Orson, this time in another movie, The Trial, 1962, when Joseph K. is left alone by a woman when he is looking for another woman, Marika Barsner. Once again, the loneliness of a man is shown in the frame, creating the sense of romanticism through emotions.
Hell, it's light. I'll never get dressed for the theater. First, you've got to tell me the truth.
The second film theory is power. The film is highly influenced by the sense of power through two different facts: dominance and manipulation. Charles is constantly using these two facts of power over people, as this allows Charles to obtain his goals easier. In terms of dominance, it is shown in these scenes before the elections. Charles, who is already involved in politics, speech promising to prosecute and convict his rival, Gettys, once Charles is elected. This act shows his power through dominance because his speech is threatening instead of promising for a state's future. Another example is when Charles uses his skills to manipulate Thatcher when Charles mentions how rich he is. After this, Thatcher remains quiet after being in an arguing position. Then, Charles' face expresses his satisfaction. Later we see Charles and Carter having an argument. Charles plays a role of dominating Carter, telling him how he should write his reports. Carter rejects to work on this way because he does not see the function of a respectable newspaper of manipulating the news to create a different impact on the readers. Then we see Carter leaving the building with his case. Once again, happy faces of Charles and his colleagues reveals his satisfaction. Finally, the third film theory is feminism. As most of films made before 60s, Citizen Kane portrays feminism through its images. The film shows women without being part of relevant job roles in the story. Most of women's roles are house cleaners or dancers, avoiding women's participation in management and leadership. In the case of Susan Alexander Kane, we see a woman who has growth in the music industry. However, we cannot consider this as non-feminism, as Charles Kane is the one who pressures Susan's teachers to let Susan sing, even though most people are against Susan's performance. In this scene, we see Emily tries to convince Charles to choose his family instead of his career as politician. Once again, the feminism is exposed when Charles ignores his wife's advice and decides to stay with Susan, who is clearly dependent on Charles' power to become a singer. This act is considered as feminism, as man rejects to follow a woman's word. Another example of feminism in the film is how women are hurt mentally and physically by men. There are two scenes in the movie which explain this idea of violence against women. The first example is when Susan is getting ready for one of her performances. Her teacher is next to her, shouting to her. Susan panics. The second example is when Charles slams Susan when they are arguing.
Master Kane, whatever you want, just name it and it's yours. but you gotta love me.
To conclude, Orson Welles used similar facts to depict his films, like men being abandoned by women. There are several examples of film theory which depict Orson ideas in different ways. Orson shows constantly the protagonist's power through his films. Finally, the film adopts feminism, devaluating women, as most of films made before 60s.